working. All right, I am Joshua Lisec, known as the Ghostwriter at Joshua Lisec. Check me out on Twitter, and I am here today with the Noah Revoy, author of Become Immune to Manipulation, a recently released book that teaches practical persuasion principles and also teaches you how to become resistant to manipulation in family, in business contexts, and even in popular culture and politics. Thanks for joining me today, Noah.
Thank you for inviting me. It's been a real pleasure to work with you.
Awesome, awesome. So tell people a little bit about the book. Why did this book need to exist?
Yeah, I originally started thinking I'm going to help people figure out how to identify what's the truth. Because this way, they're going to be able to make better decisions in their life and they're going to have better outcomes. And this came out of my work of coaching people in starting with business coaching and shifting into personal coaching as I realized that almost every business problem is actually a relationship and personal issue. It's an issue with the individuals that are doing business with each other versus something, technical like accounting. And I realized, though, at a certain point that most people can't identify truth out of a pile of potential options. So it's like them finding a needle in a haystack and they can't do it. What I could do, though, is I could teach them how to recognize when they're being lied to and manipulated and tricked. And that as long as they can avoid the worst lies, the worst manipulations, the worst tricks, and they can start to limit the options in front of them down to ones that are acceptable, that was the only way that I could help the vast majority of people, simply because most of us aren't educated in a way in which we're capable of identifying the truth in a scientific way. That's really what science is about, is identifying truth. Even most scientists, as we've learned in the last epidemic, have a hard time identifying truth from what they wish was true. And so I started using these tactics with people and saying, okay, maybe this is how you're being manipulated. Maybe that's how you're being manipulated. I started using it in my own life. And I came across a think tank that I started to work with, natural law think tank. And their focus was on how do we scientifically identify truth? And one of the things they came up with was the GSRRM list from Kurt Doodle came up with that in conjunction with the others in the think tank, where we could list out, these are the tactics they use to manipulate you. And these, manipulation is social and emotional warfare. So instead of someone punching you in the face or launching a grenade at you, they hit you with attacks that use your emotions against you, that use your desire to be part of a human community in a group, which we all have. They use that against us to get control of us and make us do things that aren't in our best interests. And I came to a point where I realized, once you know it's manipulation, you can just say no. I don't consent to agreeing to your terms. I just won't do that. No, I'm out. I'm not part of this manipulation. In our private life with friends and family, that works. It works in work. I have a friend of mine, and he was saying that at work, when they say, okay, we've got a bunch of jobs for you to do somewhere, and the conditions aren't what you want, he just says, no, I won't take it. And they're like, oh, you got to, or we won't call you anymore. Okay. They call him anyway next week for more contracts, because most people want to deal with people that have good boundaries. If they can manipulate you, you think that that's going to be, that in their interest. But actually, once they know they can manipulate you, they worry that anyone can manipulate you. And then how do they trust you to go out and advocate for their interests? And even in our personal life, if your child can manipulate you, now he realizes that he has a weak father. If your wife can manipulate you, now she realizes she has a weak husband. Who's going to protect her? This is why often manipulators are unhappy whether or not the manipulation works. We talked about it being a win-lose in the book, but a lot of times it's a lose-lose. Most of the time, manipulation creates lose-lose situations.
And so what's interesting about the book is the many use cases of it. What you do is you lay out exactly what manipulation is. It seems like words like influence and manipulation, coercion, persuasion, in popular culture can sometimes be used interchangeably. And there's books that say, I'll teach you how to persuade people. And they talk about reciprocity and scarcity and these sorts of things. And then other books that purport to teach persuasion will teach you manipulation, how to manipulate women into bed with you, how to manipulate the client saying yes. And so there's a lot of fuzzy definitions around these terms. And so what Become Immune to Manipulation does, your book, Noah, is it lays out here is the most precise and useful definitions of these words, how to choose the path of integrity, how to eliminate those attacks coming at you, or at least to defend against those attacks. And the GSRM is an acronym that includes like guilt, shame, so on and so forth. And people need to check out the book for more on that. And all business problems are people problems, the book points out. And all people problems are manipulation problems, where people are trying to use guilt or asymmetric information, where they'll know something that you don't, and they'll try to withhold that information from you, or they'll lie, believing that the truth hurts worse than the lie. And of course, we have to manipulate ourselves to believe something like that. And so the first major lesson of the book is how to stop manipulating yourself around even diet, lifestyle, fitness, children you have, spouse you may have, your clients, even your customers, boss, coworkers, employees. And then from there, how to extricate yourself from manipulative circumstances. And there's one example after the next from business and personal life, real world manipulation, the effects of it and how to prevent it, and up to and including getting canceled on social media, that sort of manipulation. And
Well,
so,
and every layer of manipulation, so we manipulate ourselves, someone manipulates us on top of that, they're getting manipulated by a third party, everyone's getting manipulated by high culture and the government and maybe churches and other things. And every layer of manipulation we have to look through distorts our vision. And it gets to the point where we can't see anything for sure. We don't know what the truth is anymore. We get to this point where we can't make good decisions because we can't see what's in front of us. And every layer of that we can remove, our vision of what's happening gets clearer and clearer until the point where we can make good decisions once again. And we can start to act in our own interests. Because the whole point of manipulation is the manipulator wants you to do something or not do something. They want you to conform, to agree with them, basically. They're looking for consent. They're looking for your consent to do something. And it's a non-reciprocal consent where they win and you lose. And the more clearly that we can see, the better we can avoid that. And so once, if you might say, I have no power at work, I have no power over politics. So remove manipulation internally, that's your self-manipulation. Remove it with your friends and family. Just start there. That takes some layers of that fog we have to look through away. And you're going to find that once you remove some layers, it gets easier to remove the next layer and the next layer. And it's a ripple effect. When we don't allow ourselves to be manipulated and we don't use manipulation on others, they start to find that they don't want to use manipulation anymore either, because they realize there's an alternative. Most people that manipulate us are not evil. They're scared people trying to get their needs met. They're desperate. And the only thing they know is the only thing that's ever been used on them and the only thing they've ever seen work, and that's manipulation. And they're just using what they know. And then once we demonstrate to them there is better ways, many people will instinctively change, even if they don't understand what happened.
Right. And now all of these ideas are practical. They are useful. They are everyday tips that we can deploy immediately with our colleagues, with kids. Now, you had mentioned that there have been authors, there have been writers, there have been bloggers who have attempted to teach effectively the ultimate guide to persuasion and manipulation prevention, and they failed. And it was ultimately that recognition of yours that 95% of people would not be able to understand the academic version of this, and you wanted to write an easy to read, accessible book for the general public. And you said, I should get a ghostwriter for that.
Yeah.
Tell us about that decision process.
So a lot of the scientific basis on which the book is based comes from think tanks like the Natural Law Institute, who has been working to try to end the unfair, or you would say the destructive human social warfare. So we've done a pretty good job of suppressing violence in most countries in the West, but we've done a terrible job of suppressing our use of emotional and social warfare against each other. And what they've been doing is they've been working on that problem for years, but they work at it at such a high level that the vast majority of people can't understand even the language they're using. It's very legalistic, it's very scientific. Now I can understand it, and I've worked with them and helped them to develop these ideas as well. I've contributed to the development of the system. But I could pull out information and I could use it with my clients. But I was having a really hard time writing in such a way that I could reach the middle 80% of the population. The majority, the people who are actually pulling the weight in society, who would make the cultural change needed to reduce manipulation in the world. And so that's why I hired you as a ghostwriter, was to take the ideas that I had been using and working with my generally very highly intelligent clients and make it accessible to everyone. Now, this isn't to say that, we had to dumb it down. It's to say that we had to get better at explaining it. And there is a difference between that. Like I will colloquially joke that we dumbed it down, but what we did is we used the simplest language possible to explain incredibly deep concepts. And I think even some of the people that have read the book already have said the book is really deep. They felt it was very deep, and yet they felt it was very easy to read. So I think we hit the mark on that perfectly.
Awesome. And you mentioned that it's already getting some excellent positive reviews, including from people at the National Law Institute. And there was a story you were mentioning just before we got on here of one day after publication, you had what is effectively a manuscript monetization success story. Tell us about what happened.
Yeah, one day or so after it was published, I got contacted by a man who says, I've been following that research institute, the think tank that I belong to. And he says, I kind of understand what they're doing. And, I recognize there's a lot of value there, but I couldn't figure out how to explain that to people, to how to teach other people, how to talk to his wife about it and his daughter, for example. And he says, then your book came out and I read your book and I said, this is how I can explain it to other people. This is simple and clear. So he came to me and he bought, a support package where I'm going to teach him how to teach that in his community. He lives in a minority. He's a minority, lives in a minority community where there's a lot of young entrepreneurs, and they get bombarded with, you're part of our community, therefore you have to think like us type manipulation. And a lot of that thinking isn't good for business. It's harmful for these young entrepreneurs. So he's going to teach these young men and young women how to resist manipulation, how to accomplish what they want to accomplish in their lives without getting overwhelmed by the groupthink that often happens in smaller communities. You have a small community, groupthink manipulation can really just steamroll individuality. And sometimes we're not used to that if we're a more individualistic person. We've never seen how difficult it can be, but if you've ever been part of, a culty type religion, you know what that's like, and it's hard to break out from that. And anyone that can help people to develop that inner strength that they can resist that, it's going to make for a much better society.
Excellent. So this is extremely effective and timely information that's in this book. And that's one of the things I like about it, is that because of our communication technology, we have more opportunities to reach more people with anything: our career, our expertise, our stories, our ideas, even our opinions. But at the same time, we have more avenues to be manipulated than we ever have been before because of communication technology. And so if you don't want to get mentally and emotionally sick from manipulation and twisted, you need to become immune to manipulation. That does not mean that there will not be attacks. It will mean that they don't work, and that people in your personal life and in your business world, your industry, whether that be clients, whether it be employees or a boss, they will realize manipulation doesn't work on this person. I should try something else. And so what you do is you teach people to respect your boundaries, to respect you, which means that they have to, even if they're self-interested, self-seeking, and you can't quote unquote change them, you can ultimately affect their behavior by resisting what it's not working, the manipulation. And then, well, maybe we should do something else instead. Maybe we should be reciprocal. Maybe we should offer a better deal rather than what it is we've been offering. And that, of course, applies universally. So with
And I
this,
don't mind if people are self-interested as long as they're meeting their needs in a way that doesn't infringe on me meeting my needs. In fact, if we can both meet our needs together, that's the ideal situation, because now I have an investment in your success and you have an investment in mine. And that's how we create a society. You know, I talked about being individuals, but we are individuals in a mesh network of other people. And the more that we can ensure that we're creating win-win solutions everywhere, the stronger our relationships are going to be. You know, manipulation leaves a legacy of distrust and fear amongst those who have been subjected to it. And so you get a low trust society where people don't cooperate. Persuasion leaves a legacy of trust and a legacy of cooperation with people. And then you end up with a high trust society where cooperation is easy and fast, and people can do a lot more in that kind of society. The cost of survival is lower, and the results or the benefits of doing things together is much, much higher. And we have, for 100 and something years, been undermining the trust in Western civilization. And hopefully this is the turning point where people get the information they need to change that decline that we've been having. Really, the decline of Western civilization has been that we've allowed ourselves to be manipulated with unhealthy ideas.
and then we, to use a popular buzzword, we internalize that manipulation, and we manipulate ourselves. I think one of the reasons why you suspected that I would resonate with your thinking, with your ideas before we even began working together, is you saw a poll that I had run. This is like a month or two before we began working on the book together. I think even before you said, Joshua, you're hired, let's do this. And you remember this poll, so you probably know where this is going. I tweeted, I said something like, is manipulating someone okay if it makes them do the right thing? It was maybe 70-30. 70% yes, 30% no.
I think you even broke it out into like, I'm a man, yes, I'm a man, no, I'm a woman, yes, I'm a woman, no. If I remember,
there was a gender component with it as well, and I think it was in the replies, because it went mini viral and got quite a few replies. And it was interesting that in the replies, there were people saying, absolutely not, the right thing to do is not the right thing to do if I have to do the wrong thing to make you do the right thing, something like that. Or no, the ends never justify the means. And then there are people say, yes, of course, I do this daily, LOL. Of course, that's how I manipulate my kids into doing what they need to do, LOL. And it's politically incorrect to point this out, but it was all women saying, yes, manipulation is fine. It was all men saying, no, it's never fine. And that was interesting. But what's even more interesting is, as you and I have both leaned into that, of course, manipulation's okay. We've both tweeted about it. We've both presented about it. We've both given interviews. Some of the same people in that replies to that poll, 5-6 months later, had changed their tune. We had persuaded those people that manipulation is unhealthy, even if it's the end, and even if it's a means used to justify the righteous end. Because if it's the right thing to do, and you have to do the wrong thing to get it, well, then it's not the right thing. Exactly, is it? And so that's an interesting point that you do clarify in the book. Is it ever actually okay? Is it ever actually the right thing to do to manipulate? So there is an lesson in an advanced section on that inside the book. And furthermore, there's even a whole frequently asked questions about manipulative situations, from in-laws to getting canceled on social media, how to respond to those particular things. So this really is both the high level and the down-to-earth practical, what do I say when someone says this to me at work, level of depth to this book.
I've been seeing, as I don't think they read my book yet, but I've seen occasionally some people who are real forward thinking, applying some of the principles from the book. They discovered it on their own. Recently, someone was tweeting that they had been had a journalist try to cancel them. So they hired a detective to do what, the journalist is going to research you. I'm going to research the journalist. And they used the same thing that the journalist did to them. They used back and found out all this information about the journalist. And that's reciprocity. The journalist is going to do it to me. I'm going to do it to the journalist. And it's interesting that people are realizing that if you want to work with a journalist and they're going to create a win-win situation, they're going to tell the truth. They're going to be honest. They're going to make sure, journalists don't write for the subject, they write for the public. But they write for advertisers really, but if they're going to create a win-win situation and they're going to create a trust in themselves, it's great to work with them. But this is why no one wants to work with journalists, is because they're only interested in the advertiser. They're not interested often in truth. And so these type of situations popping up, the more that we can socially discourage this kind of behavior, the less often it's going to happen, and the better a society we get out of it. The same way that we suppressed violence as a society during the Middle Ages, we incrementally suppressed it until by the time of the First World War, it was very difficult for the European nations to encourage their populace to even go to war, because people have become so preferring of peaceful solutions to their problems rather than fighting. And we can do the same with manipulation. We can create a society that prefers persuasion and winning and win-win negotiation and fair deals over a society that prefers to prey on each other, which is what we have now.
And so what you're doing with this book, and more broadly speaking with these ideas, is creating a world that's immune to manipulation-free world. And that's the message, that's the mission, and it's bigger than any one manuscript. Well, Noah, thanks so much for joining us today and sharing about what this book is already doing for people, even after just a few days out. I expect to create even more clients for you.
Thank you very much. Yes, I'm looking forward to it.
My pleasure. Take care.